What's happening, fishing friends? Welcome to another episode. So you've just picked up a new baitcaster and you're looking to put line on it, or you've put line on a baitcaster before and you've ran into some issues. Well, you're in the right spot because today I'm going to be talking about spooling up and putting line on a baitcaster, specifically 5 mistakes when you're doing this. And these are mistakes that I've made, mistakes that other people have made when you're starting out, or even if you've tried doing it for a while, you have some issues, you just can't figure them out. So I want to go over those 5 mistakes today and how to fix them up. You know, I've had a lot of heartache over the years putting line on, learning the hard way. Oh, I forgot to do this, or this happened wrong. So I want to share those secrets, tips, whatever you want to call them today, to try to help you out in case you're running into the same issues. All right, so first off, you'll need your baitcaster. This is a baitcaster that you all just saw recently, that brand new Lew's Speed Spool LFS, $100 reel. Great reel for beginners. I think you get a lot of good features, good bang for your buck at $99. I'm going to be putting on some PLine Fluoroclear today. Now, as a beginner, braid or a real soft, supple copolymer or a monofilament. The other one that I like that I tell people about is the PLine XL in the red box. It's a nice, soft, supple monofilament. Usually 12 pound or 15 pound is my go-to. Something like that is going to cast easier. Now, I don't usually tell beginners to go to braid just because of the cost. Same thing for fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon's a little bit more wiry. If you're starting out, you want to be able to get the hang of casting and getting that all down before you start trying different lines and stuff. So go with the soft, supple line. I kind of advise against braid because of the cost, and if you get knots in it, you can end up having to cut it out. But a soft copolymer or a monofilament is what I use, or what I would recommend. So the first mistake I see people running into is not keeping everything straight. And what I mean is, I'm going to show you here a different angle. When you're putting line on a baitcaster, you want to have everything in one line. Now, I'm going to use this little makeshift deal here. This is just an old tackle warehouse box. I've put a pin through one side of it, and that's what my spool is going to be sitting on. Your spools here have a hole on the inside there, so you could have a buddy hold this if you wanted. Spouse, somebody else could hold this for you while you're putting it on. I just do this because oftentimes it's me by myself doing it. All kinds of different ways you can do this. I just use literally a cheap cardboard box, a pin. You've got a little spooling station. So you want to keep this all in one straight line. So what I mean is, I don't want to have my reel here and my line clear off over to this direction, right? I want to have my line straight in front of my reel so it's coming off the spool. So I want the line coming off, my spool of line coming off the top of it as it's unwinding, going right into my baitcaster the same way. You don't want to have this flipped around like this, where it's coming off backwards and going on. That's where you're going to run into some line kinks and twisting and that stuff. So you want your line coming off the top of it, going into your reel. It's going to start spooling right on. I know there's different line spooling contraptions. I'm just using an old rod that I have here. As you can see, it broke a little past halfway up there. I'm using that old rod and putting my reel on it. That way I can just, it's short down here. I can get my reel spooled up, pull it off and put it on the other rod. But what I'm going to do is take my line and run it through that first line guide, the line guide closest to my reel here, as I'm getting ready to spool it up. Now, I know a lot of people have trouble with this part when you're putting the line through the line guide and trying to figure this out. One thing that works for me is if it's a reel like this Lew's Speed Spool that has the holes in it, I'm going to take my line, run it in here. As you can see there, my line's coming in through the line guide. I'm going to put it right down in one of the holes of the spool. Then I'm going to take and just slowly spin the handle, and you'll see that that line actually comes right around for me. So I can grab that line and I've got it all the way around perfectly just like that. Now, the knot that you tie is up to you. Just make sure that when you tie your knot, it's directly in the middle of the spool. You don't want to have a knot off to the side. Some people say tie an arbor knot. I'm just going to tie an improved clinch knot here real quick because it's the quickest one for me. Y'all don't even want to know how I have this camera rigged up here so I can get this angle. Now we're still on mistake 1. I know we're kind of going here, but mistake 1, like I was saying, is keep everything nice and straight. Now, another part of that is when you're holding the line. So I advise holding the line between your index finger and your thumb like this to give it a little bit of tension. And I can't tell you the exact amount. You don't want to hold it too tight. I'll talk about that here in a second, but just a little bit of tension on your line. Now, some people will say, take a rag and soak that rag with some of this stuff like Real Magic or Real Snot, KVD line conditioner, something like that that's going to help take some of that memory out and cast a little easier. So we're going to pretend like we're doing that with a rag here if you want, or you can just spray this on in between a little bit. Whatever you want to do, the line conditioner stuff does help, but put a little bit of tension on your line like this. Now, when I'm saying that is you want to keep it straight with the rod. As you can see, I'm holding it straight on the rod here. When you do your line tension, you don't want to hold your line tension over here or hold it over here somehow. Keep everything all in one good straight line. And when I start reeling, I'm going to point my rod straight down towards my line so it's all coming off in one straight line. Okay, that's a perfect transition into mistake number 2. And that's the tension on the line. There's different ways of doing this. Some folks will put tension on the line down here, so you could put like, something against the spool. You can see I have a blue paper towel down there. You could put that under it. Other folks will hold the line like I was saying. That's personally how I prefer to do it. Some people will put like a book, like the line in between a book. There's all kinds of crazy stuff I've heard. I think the easiest and less fussy is just to hold your line up here with your 2 fingers, or your finger and your thumb. Keep good constant pressure. Now, mistake number 2 is too much or too little pressure. If you put too much pressure on this when you're spooling it up, this is your line guide here. And you'll see as you move your handle, or start to reel your handle, that line guide is going to move back and forth. You see there? Moving left. Now it's moving right. If you put too much tension on this where this line guide can't move freely, line can get stacked on one side or the other, so you can get an uneven spool. It might even be both sides where there's a little gap where it's just not moving freely enough. If you don't have enough tension on the line, so let's say you don't hold anything, you just start reeling all willy-nilly, you can get loops in the line. It's going to not wind very tight on here. It can be real loose, ragged. It's just going to mess up when you go to cast first. Everything's kind of all willy-nilly. So I can't tell you the exact amount. It's hard to explain, but you'll kind of get it as you do it more. I just hold with a little bit of pinch pressure here and start reeling. Not too much, but not too little. Kind of like the 3 little bears. So as we're reeling this in and talking about uneven line and pressure and everything, that takes us into the 3rd mistake, and that's going to be that uneven line. What really causes it? There's a few different things. Number 1, we touched on too much tension, not allowing that line guide to move back and forth freely. Number 2, as you're spooling this on, I know some people don't really like to do the whole spooling thing, and they'll go super fast. They're trying to get it done as quick as they can. When you do that, line can jump. It's not going to move evenly, so it's not a race. Slow is fast and fast is slow. If you go slow and do it right the first time, you're not going to have to do it over again. So take your time. Don't burn it. It's not a race. Another thing I've helped people with is making sure you don't have anything messing up your spool. So some people I've seen when they put line on, remember how I was talking about tension? Some people will put their thumb on here and say, well, yeah, I've got tension going this way. Well, what happens is, you notice when I'm doing this, if my drag isn't set, my spool's not moving, but that line guide is moving back and forth. If you don't have your drag tight enough, your line guide can be moving, but your spool's not. Also, if everything is working correctly and you have your thumb here, look what happens. If I put my thumb in the middle, see how it stops that line from moving back and forth just like a second in each spot? You're not going to get a good, even spooling of line. So don't put your thumb on the spool at all. Make sure you've got your drag turned up a little bit. That way, as you're spooling your line on, you know for sure that the spool's moving as the line guide is moving together. Okay, so now that we've got all that out of the way, that's a lot of the kind of the first beginner mistakes. So let's do this. I'm going to speed this up. Okay, as we're closing in here, the line's looking pretty good and even though I started wonky and kind of did some of those mistakes, it kind of evens itself out. And even if you have a little spot where it's a little uneven, once you throw a big long cast out there, a lot of times the resistance of that lure coming in as you're reeling in is going to help even this all out anyway. So don't worry if you've got just a little bit of unevenness. Your first long cast, oftentimes it'll take care of that. Now, the 4th mistake that we come up on is too much line or not enough line. So when I'm putting line on my spool, I want to get to about within 1/8 of an inch of this lip, the actual lip of the spool before it curves. So this flat side, the flat wall right here, that flat part, I want to get to it within about 1/8 of an inch of the end of that. I don't want to put more than that on because as you cast, it'll want to just all fluff off, especially with nylon lines like mono, fluoro. They want to just pop off, right? They've got that memory where they're trained to the spool. If you don't put on enough line, if I leave it right here, you're actually doing yourself a disservice because you're going to get shorter casts because you're going to get down deeper into that spool and you're actually going to slow down the gear ratio of your reel. So you can see this is a pretty quick one. This is an 8:3-to-1 speed. So if you really want to take full advantage, it assumes that speed with a full spool of line, not a half spool line or a quarter spool, a full spool. Remember, the more line that comes off this spool,
you're bringing in less line per rotation because there's not as much line on there. So keep that in mind. I know that's kind of getting down to the nitty gritty, but let me go ahead and keep doing this here. I'm going to show you. Okay, there we go. That's it, about right there. You can see I've got about 1/8 of an inch left before I get to the end of that spool. The lip of that spool, as I'll show you here. Just like that. That's about where I'm going to stop. Now you can even go just a little bit more than that because remember you're going to have to pull out line to string up your rod and tie your lure on, but about like that is where you want to end. So I'm going to probably do just like a couple more turns of the handle. That's it, and call it done. Funny thing about all that, Stubby laid there and watched me the whole time. What'd you think? Was that entertaining watching me put line on a bait caster? Were you super excited about all that? Yeah, you're pretty crazy.
All right, now that we've got the line all on, I put it on a rod. This is a new rod I'm going to be trying out. That's what we should look like right there. So you can see about 1/8 of an inch within the 1/8 of an inch of that spool right there. That's what we want. I've got enough line already out on the rod. I could tie a lure on. That's it. Well, you're wondering, what about the 5th mistake? Well, the 5th mistake is be careful when you go out to throw that first cast. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out with a new bait caster, or a bait caster I haven't used, whatever it may be, and I go out to cast, and that's the case. I haven't set my brakes. I didn't even think about it. It's a new reel. I'm so excited to try the thing. I get out there and try to bomb my first cast, bird nest. All that hard work you went into meticulously, carefully spooling up your bait caster, all gone. So double check your brakes before you cast, and throw a light cast. Throw just a 25% power, quarter power cast, just to make sure everything's working fine, flowing fine. As I said, once you get that first good cast out there, if there's any little irregularities, usually as you reel it in, it'll take care of it. Now another thing that helps is if you're a beginner and you're still trying to learn a bait cast or get used to it, throw that good first long cast out there, or have a buddy throw a good long first cast out there, and take a piece of tape, duct tape, electrical tape, whatever. After you throw that good long cast out there, put a piece of electrical tape over your spool, over your line. That way when you reel your line in over it, it's going to stick that tape down on it, and the next time you throw out a cast and you mess it up, it goes to backlash, it's not going to go past that tape. You've actually stuck the rest of your line there. It's not going to bird nest all the way down to the spool, because I've done that before. You throw it out there and you can backlash all the way down to the bottom of your spool and literally have to pull every single bit of line out that you just put on, the whole thing. So those are my 5 tips. Number 1, make sure you keep everything straight as you're reeling that line on. Everything should be in one good line, not off to the side, sideways, up, down, straight line. Number 2, make sure the tension is just right. And this is going to kind of come with doing it. You don't want to hold it super tight where it's like trying to grind it in. And you don't want to have not anything on it where it's going flopping all over. Keep that tension just right, like I said, between my thumb and my forefinger, light pressure. Number 3, don't get stuck with uneven line. I mentioned a number of things, having things off to the side. Too much tension. Your drag not set correctly. Putting your thumb on the spool as you're trying to reel it in. Avoid all those things, and I guarantee you'll have a nice, good, straight line of line on your spool just like that. 4, make sure you're putting the right amount of line on. I know some people who will put gobs of line on there, and then every time you try to cast, it's just a mess. And I know some people that are kind of scared of that, so they only put half the line on their bait caster. Try to find that perfect spot, like I said, within about 1/8 of an inch of the lip of that spool. That's where I usually like to spool it up to. And tip number 5, again, I know you're excited, but make sure you set your brakes, put a little piece of tape on there after you cast. Something, just be careful, because you don't want to ruin all that hard work. So comment below and let me know if this helped you, and if you have any special tips for someone. I know another thing that I didn't really mention, I did a video on spooling a bait caster, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. And I talked about putting on filler line on your spool. So like a real cheap monofilament if you're gonna put braid on. Some people use braid as a filler underneath their main line. I didn't even get into that, but that's another thing, especially if you're using braid. You don't wanna tie braid straight to a spool because it'll slip. I've had it happen before. Ask people who clean reels. That braid will slip right on that spool. So I usually put like a monofilament on that. Some people put electrical tape on the spool before they do it to stop the slip. I don't like that because it gets all gummy. But if you have any sort of special tips to help other beginners out there or people having trouble, comment below and let me know. Or if you like this type of video, you like this, other how-tos, Comment below and let me know what you'd like to see more of. Now tonight's subscribed fishing friend is my guy Darius Parstabar. I think that's how you say it. He was joking today about a saying, "I'd rather be out fishing beat sitting on the couch eating Doritos." That's funny. You can tell you're an OG fishing friend when you know that line. But Darius, thanks for watching. Thank you for everybody else who continues to watch and support my channel. I wouldn't be here without all of you. So I got to get this on the computer and edited. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time.